Today, we're joined by Madison Miller, a holistic nutritionist, somatics practitioner, and founder of Body Love by Madison, where she helps women regain their health and confidence, often after a long and frustrating journey through traditional medicine. Madison turned her own rock bottom health experience into a new model of care, blending functional medicine, emotional healing, and somatic work. She helps women address the root cause instead of chasing symptoms. In this episode, we talk about why symptoms are sacred messages, how childhood experience can manifest as physical issues, and why discipline rooted in fear will never lead to true healing. We also unpack the limitations of modern wellness and why self trust may be the most powerful medicine of all. If you have ever felt like you're doing everything right and still not feeling good, this conversation will change the way you think about your healing. Here's Madison. Welcome to In Alignment. I'm Annie.
And I'm Marissa. You were meant to find this today, and we're so glad you're here.
Welcome back to In Alignment. We are so excited to be here today with Madison Miller. Madison, I'd love if you could kick it off with a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brought you to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Like Annie mentioned, my name's Madison Miller. I'm a holistic nutritionist. I work currently in the functional medicine space, but also I do a lot of work in terms of emotional nervous system regulation, particularly with somatics and integrating the body as well as physiology and psychology. So.
Can you give us a one-over of what somatics is?
Yeah, so somatics really just means soma is the body. So I think sometimes in wellness, we're not given the full picture. We are either really hyper focused on aesthetics or, optimizing in terms of like diet and supplements, but we're not always given the more deep, fuller picture when it comes to long-term sustainable healing. So that's where somatics can come in and really being able to almost peel back the layers and slow down and listen to the body in more depth with things like sensation and things like that.
Amazing. And you had a unconventional journey into this career, I guess. Like this wasn't what you studied in school. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into this space and how your journey with it kind of grew over time?
Yeah, for sure. So I was definitely a patient before I was a practitioner, and I think that was so important to go through. I think you can only learn so much just reading a book or going to school and studying, but actually having the lived experience and being able to speak from that from an embodied place has been something that has really, really supported me in my own healing journey, but also has given me, I think, a little bit of more leverage when supporting other women. I was navigating about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer now. I was navigating a lot of my own health issues. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety in my day to day. It was hard sometimes to get out of bed in the morning, and I didn't understand why. I was feeling this kind of like wired but tired feeling. Um, I was really just unsure on where to go. I didn't know what was going on. I had this story of like, what is wrong with me? I feel broken. And also at the same time, my father was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and my dad has always and still is just the greatest man in my life and has been, kind of this macho man, like in the gym, working out every day. He's definitely one of those guys who was always really focused on his fitness and health. But for some reason, this happened. So there was kind of multiple things happening at once. My dad was navigating this, I was navigating some health issues, and I wasn't getting the answers that I really wanted from conventional medicine. So this was a very illuminating time in my life to kind of take the power back into my own hands, not only for myself, but to support other individuals like my dad who are experiencing things like autoimmune, where we're not really told that this is curable or really where to go to for things like this. The inflammation piece is definitely a thing, the immune system, but we're not really told, hey, this could be related to something in your childhood, or this could be related to, a story and conditioning that you picked up along the way that helped you to survive at one point in your life. And it may have helped you to survive, but now symptoms are appearing in physical manifestations. So that was a bit of a long-winded response, but there's just a lot there when it comes to my own personal story and what has led me to this point.
Can you walk us through how you, I don't want to use the word healed, but alleviated some of your symptoms and bettered your own state of health? What was that body of work?
Yeah, I feel like it's never really complete. I
Yes.
feel like I will always be a lifelong learner when it comes to healing and just understanding my body and what it means to be a human in this modern age. I think really where the dots started connecting was when I started bridging the emotional support, the nervous system regulation piece, and diving deeper into trauma work with my physical symptoms because I felt like I was doing all the right things. I was eating very clean. I was working out. I was probably overly working out, which is a whole thing. But to me, I felt like I was doing all of the right things. Yet I wasn't feeling better. I still felt inflamed. My hair was falling out, which was so traumatic, and I didn't understand why. It was very confusing. So going deeper into the layers of, inner child work and getting really curious. I think having this state of curiosity instead of blaming myself or having this running story of criticism, which so many women do, not operating at our full potential. It's very common to just start going down the, self-criticism stories and tapping into low self-worth. So I really think there's so much that, I could share on that, but I really think kind of opening the door, opening Pandora's box when it came to some of those connections of, yeah, the mental, physical, and spiritual elements.
Annie and I have very similar experience where we felt like we were eating everything right, doing all the right things, and it wasn't until we started doing that deeper emotional work that we actually got the healing we were looking for. And like you said, it's a journey. But for someone who's maybe newer to this or is feels like they're doing everything right and has, is looking for to try something new, can you talk a little bit about how the emotional can actually affect the physical? I'm just thinking, when I heard this for the first time, my reaction was like, wait, what would my childhood have to do with the fact that I'm experiencing anxiety? Or I guess anxiety is maybe a more obvious one, but like hair loss or gut health issues or inflammation. I don't know if that's like intuitive to someone who's been primarily in our traditional healthcare system.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we are starting to have more conversation, and so many women are experiencing these things in their day to day that it's just become too big to ignore at this point. But I think honestly it can be quite uncomfortable, for women who have been navigating in this kind of function for so long. It can seem normal. It can seem normal to be in the state of fight or freeze or even a fawning response. If that is what you picked up in childhood in order to survive, in order to get your needs met. And usually those learned experiences are now how you're still operating as an adult. Uh, so again, like going into more curiosity around why maybe your body is feeling a certain type of way. And there's a lot of different modalities out there and beliefs, which I really resonate with, that every single organ system is connected to an emotion. So unprocessed grief tends to show up in the lungs, or unsuppressed anger shows up in the liver. And so there's always going to be a physical manifestation that occurs based on an unprocessed emotion. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but 9 out of 10 times we're experiencing these things over and over and over again, and we're not listening. So then we can start to experience something uncomfortable in the body. And the way I see it, instead of blaming the body, these are sacred messengers that are trying to help us. The body is always trying to get us back into homeostasis and back into a place of feeling really, really good. So also think having that mindset, and I've always been very passionate about the world of wellness and health. So I think having that curiosity has been something that has helped me along the way when symptoms started to come up, as uncomfortable as they've been for me. I knew that my body was speaking to me in a way that I could not ignore. And that felt actually empowering because I'm like, okay, now what can I do with this? Instead of feeling like I was almost a victim to my experience.
What type of symptoms do you see often in women that are emotionally rooted?
In terms of like women who are maybe suppressing or like physical symptoms.
If we are constantly suppressing or using these strategies to avoid feeling our feelings or processing them, what are some ways that those emotions manifest physically that we could look out for and be like, oh, maybe the answer to this isn't to eat more protein or go on these supplements, but maybe it's to go inward and there could be an emotional root. So, just for people listening, what are some things that, if you're experiencing them, looking inward and exploring the emotional root might be worthwhile?
Yeah, absolutely. Jaw pain, we're seeing so much TMJ and it's increasing. That can be just a symptom of chronic stress. And it's happening a lot too when we're sleeping. So we're not actually like when we're sleeping, the body is not feeling safe enough to fully wind down and shut down. And that's coming out in, clenching our jaws and having this intense jaw pain, chronic headaches, any tension in the body, really, but headaches, jaw pain, sleeping disrupted, waking up between like 2 to 4 a.m. is very common in women. Feeling again of like, I'm doing everything right, but nothing seems to be working. I also see a lot of women who are really relying heavily on caffeine and maybe having a higher caffeine intake, but they're not actually feeling more energetic. They're actually just experiencing more anxiety and still that wired but tired feeling. And then emotional capacity is big one, feeling like you're gonna kill someone, These very minor things are setting women off and they don't feel like they have control over their emotions. So not having more flexibility or range or this overall sense of resilience. I'm also seeing a lot of women come to me with bladder pain and symptoms of UTIs and things that are just going on within the reproductive system. And that can be a really big indicator of unprocessed emotions and suppression and also sexual trauma, too.
And I think you mentioned at one point that women often come to you after they've hit kind of like a rock bottom. How can women maybe seek this out a little bit earlier? Or what are you seeing with the people who come to you?
Yeah, I do think it depends, but I do see a lot of women who are seeking help when they've hit almost that rock bottom place. And I think a lot of that has to do with just what we're told as a society. I think as women, we are taught to endure, endure pain, to bypass poor sleep, to show up a certain type of way, to, kind of not be too much, but be assertive be assertive, but not too much, and it kind of fits into this good girl approach, and good girl kind of story that we've been fed for a really long time. It's like, don't take up too much space, but make sure you're still showing up and taking up some space. So it's all of these contradictory stories that we've been fed for so long, generations and generations, um and I think there is a lot that is shifting, in this current day and age, but we're still not there. I think we're starting to get to a better place. But I think it's because we've been taught to really just endure a lot as women and to not be seen as weak or, less than men, and those kind of narratives.
It feels like a daunting task. Like, if you have TMJ or you have pelvic pain or, skin issues or whatever it may be, and potentially there is an emotional root to it, where do you start? Like, how do you maybe use your personal experience of how did you start moving through some of these symptoms by addressing the emotional root, and what does that look like?
Honestly, I got so tired of my own shit that
Yeah.
use my language, but I got so tired of my own shit that I had to do something different, and I wish it didn't get to that place of where I was at rock bottom within my own experience, but at the end of the day, I had to take radical responsibility for my life and for my emotions and for how I wanted to continue moving forward. So again, it kind of goes into that curiosity of like, instead of staying stuck in this place and staying stuck in this, miserable mindset where I'm experiencing these physical symptoms, how can I ask for help? And sometimes we don't know how to ask for help. But for me, having a safe space, especially being witnessed by other women and seeking out, one woman in my life who I knew was going to hold space for me or, a woman's group. And if you don't have that, create that. I've created women's groups where we can come together and talk about these things in our lives that maybe we can't always talk about in our day to days, with our partners or families or, what we're doing in work. But it's so important. And I think that is very much a first step is to just getting really, really honest with yourself and allowing yourself to be witnessed in that as well. Cause that can really soften the blow. When you're getting witnessed and something that feels uncomfortable, it can feel uncomfortable, but also very relieving because you're like, wow, I am finally not lying to myself or pretending to be this perfect put together person that, just is doing everything right. Like, no, I am a human and I am not perfect. I am navigating X, Y, and Z, and I don't have all the answers. So please hear me.
Community is feel like that Annie and I have both had the best experiences with kind of healing as a group and feeling less alone, whereas our medical system is so individualized.
Yeah.
And also, I think a lot of people listening to this might hear this and think, okay, good. I've been in therapy for a long time. And at least in my experience, therapy was great. It was really great for awareness of a lot of things in my life and a place to process kind of from a mental standpoint, how I was feeling and what I was doing. But when we're talking about this deeper emotional healing, the kind of healing that alleviates symptoms in your body and where you feel a difference and you can move through those emotions, oftentimes our traditional therapy that we think of here, at least in the US, is a little bit different. I know that you're also currently studying, you're becoming um, you're pursuing your clinical degree in mental health. Can you talk a little bit about like therapy versus somatics? Like, how do you actually seek the right kind of provider to help you with this deeper level of work?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is definitely a super nuanced topic, but I absolutely agree. I think traditional talk therapy, it can be beneficial, but time and time again, I've heard that it's not really working for the person because they're kind of just looping and going in circles and not really able to move the needle forward when it's just traditional talk therapy. Again, super nuanced. I'm not saying that isn't effective in ways and depending on what your needs are. But I think, to your point, community is everything and having this more group centered approach. I think it's going to be something that we're going to start seeing more and more of just because we have been so isolated and continue to kind of function in these isolated places. Where a lot of us are still working from home, which can be great, but also it's caused like a lot of loneliness. We're not going out into the world as much. We are glued to our smartphones. and there's this honestly epidemic of loneliness happening. And so I think, again, having this communal sense of wellness is going to be huge. And in terms of being able to, again, just speak what we're navigating and speak our stories out loud to others, I think it really can help people to not feel so alone in their experiences, and could honestly save someone, eh, from themselves and the mind, So I think it's so important to be able to create, again, these spaces, where we are coming together and we are talking and sharing stories from the heart.
Yeah, I feel like so much too of our suppression is this pressure to feel like we have to be perfect to our friends, to our bosses, to our partners, to the world. Like we have to operate, perfectly and not be too emotional, not be too much, not be too needy, not express our true needs, not complain. And I think when we aren't honest with our environments, our friends, our families, our partners, and definitely like not honest with ourselves, that stuff just gets buried and buried and buried and buried. And they always say the body whispers until it screams. And I think some of the screams are like the loudest cry of, hey, we're not living in alignment, or we're not speaking our truth, or we really have to sit with these feelings and maybe make changes in our life in accordance to them. But it's hard and it's daunting work. And I think it's easy to say, open up to people, find the supportive people, but it's like if you don't have them in your life, where do you even start? So I guess that is a question for you as well, is do you have advice on ways to build authentic feminine friendships, or any support groups that you've personally leaned on, or anything that you've built? Where should people start that might be listening to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are all great points. Not every single person in your life is going to be a safe space for you to just open up to. And a lot of the times, the people that have been closest to us, our family members, like they may be a root of why you feel the way you do. I know for me, I had a story of like, why are you so sensitive? Because I grew up very sensitive and my parents didn't know how to deal with it. So I have learned that yes, I have a great relationship with my parents, but I'm probably not going to go to them for certain things because it also hasn't felt great to be misunderstood. That's not something that I am carrying at this point in my life, but it's also discernment, and learning discernment is a very real thing. But in terms of finding these, supports, there actually is a lot of resources online, which I think is great. Even just like getting on social media or Googling like women's like groups, women's circles nearby. There's a lot of free events. I don't know if people really realize like how many free events like are on Eventbrite or even like Facebook or Instagram. People are always posting about these things. And I think it just takes a little bit of courage to put yourself out there, to show up, to yeah, to realize that there's quite a bit of access out there. It may just feel a little bit uncomfortable putting yourself out there at first.
It's so cool though when you do, because at least in my experience going to some of these types of things and doing some of the community healing, it's when you walk in, you see people and you think, "Oh, we're really different." Like they're all of it different ages. Maybe some of those people are super successful. Some of those people are like cool artsy people and you think that you have all of these differences, and when you start talking, you realize like at the root of it, so many of us are dealing with the same kind of inner pain or needs of wanting to feel seen and worthy and good in our bodies, and getting ahead of that, like in our society, which is very reactive, or our medical system, which is very, very reactive. It's like, oh, you have a problem. Here's a solution. Here's a band-aid, and kind of silencing the body. I think doing a lot of these things proactively is maybe not intuitive to us to like, even if you're not at your rock bottom right now, to like start these practices because they'll help you over time. And I think, yeah, like from your experience with you've done nutrition, you're doing clinical mental health, you've done the somatic work. How do those things kind of like play together for someone? Or like when you're working with someone? Are there different things that come in at maybe different places in their journey? Do they all work together? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the future of wellness is going to be more of this integrative approach. So for me personally, I went down the road of nutrition and physical wellness, but it did not feel complete without the nervous system and diving more into emotional work. And then, the layer of going into functional medicine and working at a functional medicine clinic, it was like time and time again, our patients would come in with gut health issues and all of these symptoms, but they weren't able to look at inner child work or the trauma that they've experienced. And so, the gut brain axis is very much a real thing. And so all of these kind of layer on top of each other, but they weave all together. We are holistic beings and we need to start approaching our lives as the holistic, multifaceted beings that we are, because all of these facets are going to affect our overall well being, our relationships, our environments, the way we eat. That is still very important. Diet is still very, very important. How we move, how we meditate, how we breathe, all of these facets, they come together. It's really not just one thing, but it's also, in a way, not trying to get overwhelmed by that, because I can also see it's like, oh, we're, being thrown in all of these different directions and optimize. And it's really not about optimization, it's about embodiment. And I think that's where we've kind of, gotten into a little bit of a messy place when it comes to the wellness industry, is that optimization has now taken over embodiment. We're not listening to ourselves. We're not listening to the body. Instead, it's, I got to follow this protocol. I need to do what she's doing because she looks great and she looks happy. And it's ignoring the actual signs and cues of what our individuality is sharing with us.
I was gonna ask you this, like, so much of the wellness industry is so beautifully packaged, it's aesthetic, it's alluring, it promises amazing results, but Marissa and I talk about this all the time. I think that, in a way, the wellness industry is actually contributing to this issue of dissociation for women. We are outsourcing our agency, we are outsourcing, you know, our health, our internal gut feelings to these plans, these programs, these supplements. And I think it's like honestly become a healthier or an organic or an all natural way to dissociate from ourselves. It's like if we are struggling with inflammation or gut issues or skin issues, what drives me crazy is like all these bloat supplements. It's why are we spending so much money on these bloat gummies instead of asking why are we so bloated to begin with? Uh,
Right. It's almost like we've
that's
normalized bloating
yeah.
now, like these normalized bloating and all of these symptoms that we experience, like a lot of us as women, and it's actually not normal. Like, yes,
No,
it's common, we're experiencing this, but it's not normal. Yeah.
GLP-1s too. I mean, like, obviously a time and place for the SSRIs, the GLP-1s, the medications, but I wish in society before we went there, we asked, "Why are we struggling with our weight? Why is there resistance? Why are we emotionally eating?" Chronic overeating we might not even know that we're doing it, but it's what emotion are we trying to escape from by going on autopilot and developing these habits? And I think that that is sometimes where the wellness industry is almost just like a healthier version of traditional medicine because it's another quick fix, a healthier quick fix, but it still is a way to outsource our agency to something else.
Yeah, it's been very, packaged very prettily. I know that's a word, but, very, like, beautiful. It's been very beautified, curated. I can't even tell you, just to be honest, I'm so tired of that kind of, like, clean girl aesthetic that we see all over Instagram and TikTok. Like, yes, it is pretty, it looks good, but it's this highly, heavily curated, this is what I'm doing morning to night. And it's just, I think it's causing a lot more damage than good, because it's not 9 out of 10 times realistic for most of us and what we're navigating.
I've
Yeah.
spent thousands of dollars on my skin. I used to struggle with really, really bad cystic acne. It was actually the reason I got put on birth control when I was 15. And then, birth control did not sit well with me, but no one gave me any other options. And so I've been on spironolactone. I didn't take Accutane, but I was prescribed it. I was prescribed doxycycline for my skin. And then I've tried every influencer skin care routine top to bottom. And I felt, like a failure because I was like, I'm doing everything right. Then I changed my diet and I was following the most rigorous diet plan perfectly. And in some ways, like the anxiety of trying to do everything so perfectly and trying everything contributes to that symptom. And it's pretty incredible because doing some of, removing all of that pressure, doing some of the emotional work and actually stripping back so much of my plan. I don't want to sound like I'm selling some quick fix, but like because it wasn't a quick fix for sure, but my skin has never been clearer. And when I have a breakout now or a pimple now, I don't have this like panic response of, oh my God, I have to like fix everything. I need to take medication. I need to go to the doctor. It's like, oh, you know what? I actually have been really stressed this week. Or I, like was on a bachelorette party and I went out to eat 7 times in a row and like didn't get enough sleep. And so I think that in some ways, like those perfect plans on Instagram, when we see someone with the 50-step morning routine, it's like it almost like you're fueling the problem that you're trying to fix.
Yeah, totally. And to your point, it's like, sounds like now you have more compassion. You're meeting yourself in a much more compassionate, loving place instead of having a pimple show up and criticizing and creating a whole story of why, you're gross or whatever. It's like, okay, yes, did I go to a bachelor party and maybe I had a few glasses of wine or I wasn't, sleeping as great? Okay. I had a lot of fun though. I had a lot of fun with my friends. I showed up. There were fun times had by all. It's not my norm. And can I give myself grace and compassion for just being a human and experiencing life and not being perfect in every single moment?
I think that hits on 2 things. One, because I used to be the same way too. I struggled with hormone stuff, skin stuff, inflammatory, gut, like all of it. And I was so afraid of losing progress or my symptoms returning. And as you said at the beginning of the podcast, healing is a journey, it's not a destination. And yes, I feel so much better than I used to consistently. But there are some times that I don't feel great. Like sometimes my PMS is a little bit worse. Sometimes I have cramps. Sometimes I feel puffy. Sometimes my gut feels funky. But the difference is exactly as Marissa was saying is I don't freak out anymore. And I think that that's twofold. It's one, learning to trust your body, that your body wants to be in a state of health. Your body wants to heal and it's not working against you. Like I think optimization culture and this fear, especially, I used to take supplements at specific times every day. If I was told by a naturopath to eat a certain way, I wouldn't touch anything that wasn't on that meal plan. And it's because I didn't trust my own body that it would be safe and heal and keep me feeling good on its own. And I think one, starting to open that line of communication with your body and build the trust that actually it does want to be in a state of health. And if we just listen to it and can give it what it needs, it will make us feel good most of the time. And secondly, that we are safe in this world even when we're not perfect. And I think similar to Marissa, like when I used to be really bloated, I would cancel social plans. I'd be like, I can only be out in the world, or I won't be accepted or received, or things won't go as well unless I'm optimized. And I think learning to trust that like we do ebb and flow as humans and we are just as safe with a pimple or 10 extra pounds or a little bit of bloat or like a little bit of a bad mood. Like we don't always have to appear and perform perfectly to be safe.
My gosh, yes. And you just reminded me, I think it's important to share when I was first starting on my journey to becoming more of like a practitioner and I was starting to show up even on social media in ways of like, I'm sharing more about healing and more about health. I remember, I was in my earlier 20s. I've been on this journey now for a bit, but I remember having this feeling of like, "Oh, what if I show up this way, then I won't be taken seriously," or, you know, I had that perfectionism come with me on this journey, for quite some time. That was instilled within me for so long. And I'm like, I need to be seen in a certain type of way if I'm expressing myself around healing and health. So if I show any signs of weakness or any signs that I'm not healed, I'm not going to be taken seriously. And that was it's like a major thing that I navigated because I realized this is not why I'm doing what I'm doing. And this goes against everything that I believe in. Yet this story is so deeply embedded into my like cellular being, it felt like that it was something that I really had to navigate as I was starting to show up in this way.
And also, I think once your identity is so rooted in being a healer or inspiring people on their healing journey, I think, well, and even if it's not, even if you're not a public social media person, even if you're just kind of like a lot of your identity is tied up in that, I think it can take on a life of its own that sort of negates from what you were trying to do, where now your life kind of revolves around healing, like you're like thinking about it so much, almost like as a project. Or at least that's been my experience in the past where I feel like I got so deep into this healing journey that I almost lost sight of the fact that a lot of my life should just be lived and enjoyed without having to necessarily be thinking about healing all the time. I think you've talked a little bit about this to yourself, but
Yeah,
like striking that balance.
absolutely. And like I said previously, we are multifaceted beings. So, yes, it's so important to be we're going to be on this journey of life, navigating growth, and hopefully most of us want to expand in our growth and become, the best versions of ourselves as possible. But also I just really believe that we were created here to explore and to sometimes go through trial and error and figure out what feels good, figure out what doesn't feel good. I mean, if I hadn't gone through all of those experiences of my own health health, journeys and symptoms and all of that, like, I would not be where I am today. I would not have the lived experience and the embodiment to now be at this place where I know myself better. I love myself better, and I have more compassion because I have been really hard with myself. I've had the self-criticism and all the doubt and the shame and the blame. But because I've gone through that and have navigated that, I now can approach my life with a lot more grace and love. So I think everything we go through in life can support us. It goes into mindset again. It can support us and fuel us in ways to heal and to expand and to grow. But yeah, it's a lifelong journey, and I think it's okay again to be a human and to go out every once in a while. And if you're going to have a glass of wine, like really enjoy that glass of wine. If you're going to have a cookie, really enjoy that cookie and weave a lot of love and intention and you know, say a prayer to that cookie or glass of wine that is just going to, weave with your body in a really loving, joyful way.
I really appreciate that comment because there's so much out there on social media, an animal-based diet, vegan, vegetarian, no sugar, sugar's gonna kill you, and, like, yes. Do we want to be pumping sugar into our body all day, every day? Absolutely not. But is a cookie every once in a while gonna kill you? No. Is a glass of wine? No. And I think that wellness trap, it sets us up to fail because we try and just like abandon our cravings, our needs, creature comforts, habits, joy in order to feel safe by like optimizing or following a perfect plan. And when we can drop that rigidity, whether it's like macro tracking or trying to hit 120 grams of protein or like never eating sugar again, and go inward and be like, am I actually hungry? Okay, for what? If it's someone's birthday and there's a delicious cake and you want a piece, amazing, enjoy it. If you don't like that type of cake or you're too full, don't eat it. Like the black and white mindset just sets us up to fail every time. But I guess my question for you would be it's hard. Like, I'm saying this after years and years and years of being the opposite and following every extreme and falling off and getting back on and beating myself up. It is a hard intuitive dance to develop, but once you do develop it, it's really liberating and life-changing. How do you work with clients and maybe use your personal experience or the way that you help clients through this to develop that internal self-trust and kind of like embodiment rhythm?
Great question. I mean, I think so much of it is, laying that foundation. So when I work with a client, when I'm working with a woman for the first time, I really open up the space to have them share, obviously prompting around the different areas like I've discussed around quality of relationships, quality of your overall life, movement, all of these facets of health and well-being in our lives, and really getting curious with them around how those are feeling for them. So opening up this space, letting them really share their story and have the space to really share from the heart, and witnessing them in that. And then from there, it's, peeling back all of those layers. Sometimes we're going deeper into an area and maybe something around childhood is explored and navigated so that we can start putting the pieces together of maybe why someone is overeating or maybe why someone has this consistent story playing in their head around low self-worth and not good enough or whatever it is. Where did you pick that up? And why. And when we can start to put those pieces together, then I think we can begin to have more awareness over our lives and more awareness around the world around us. And to begin to understand that, yes, the systems in our day and age may not be supportive for us, but we have autonomy and we actually have a lot more power than we think we do to create the lives that we would like to live from a place of sovereignty.
I resonate with that so much just because I feel like, I definitely didn't have sort of that self grace or that like resonance. When you talk about like where did you pick things up, I think one of the things that's kind of can sound scary about these conversations is it when we hear like trauma or childhood, we think of something that might be like really, really, really scary or impossible to relive. But we really do pick up so many little patterns and things across our lives that impact us that, maybe you were a big sister who kind of always took care of your little siblings and you just feel that weight of the world on your shoulders and you're carrying that into your romantic relationships. But when I think about how can we become more embodied and start listening to our bodies, that first layer of like really understanding why we kind of are the way we are is really helpful. And it's not that we are in because I think a lot of like medicine too and the way we diagnose people, it's like these very intrinsic we describe them as like intrinsic qualities, like, you are this way. And I love the reframing of these are things you picked up or things that you feel, and it gives this agency for people to explore that without judgment and have like forgiveness and empathy and compassion for themselves and others and really be able to kind of move towards a way of being that is happier and healthier and better for them, which I my personal experience was I didn't have that like hope when before I kind of got into this work, like when I was in the medical system, I was like, I'm really OCD. I have bad anxiety. I have insomnia. Like I wore those labels and I thought I was kind of stuck with that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like these titles instead of the narrative of, oh, I am a human experiencing anxiety in this moment, but not, kind of claiming it as I am an anxious person and that is just who I am. I think it can give us a lot of just more space to and maybe relief is a better word, maybe more relief around, okay, maybe I'm not that person. I'm not someone who is OCD. I'm experiencing OCD. Why? And it's getting more curious around the why piece here is really just so important. And then I really do love, again, weaving in the body. So going back to the body, EFT tapping is something that I always do with my clients. It's something that I do for myself. And it's these very simple practices. Sometimes I think when we hear like trauma or, like somatics and all of these like buzzy words in wellness, it's like, oh my gosh, like what, like I got to do another protocol and it's got to look X, Y, and Z. And the body is so intelligent, like we've been talking about. The body is so intelligent. The body wants you to go back into balance. It's constantly trying to get you back into homeostasis. So actually working and listening, tuning in with the body and simple practices like EFT tapping, going into just a simple tapping sequence on your head and on your face, on your chest, like these acupressure points that have actually been proven to release tension in the body, but it's not like you're throwing yourself into this crazy routine. It is simply tapping and your body is feeling a safety within that sensation and releasing tension out of the body. So, with consistency, I think consistency is so important here when it comes to doing this work. And I think actually a better word, I actually used to be quite triggered by the word consistency because it feels just sometimes masculine. At least I think that's what I felt initially as this very like feminine being. I'm like, like that feels just like so masculine. And what I reframed consistency as, and consistency does not trigger me as much anymore, but I chose to reframe it as devotion, devotion to self. And like, what does my devotional practice to self look like? And that really kind of softened things for me and made me feel a lot more feminine of like, ooh, like what does my devotional practice look like? And that just felt a little more sexier to me and a little more softer in terms of like how I could support myself from a place of more devotion, which to me just means like how I'm showing up and more self-love to myself.
Really like that because I do think that there's a lot, again, on social media of like discipline is, bad or it's, another perfectionist tendency. But I think that there's a really fine line. But it's what is the intention behind your discipline? That's the thing. If your intention is fear, it's like if I don't follow this protocol or eat this certain way or do this morning routine because then I won't look a certain way or I'm afraid I can't control myself into perfect health, the intention is rooted in fear, then yes, it is a little bit, we got to dive into that. But if the intention behind a really solid and consistent morning and nighttime routine and getting out for fresh air and walking or even strength training and eating real whole foods most of the time, if the intention is like self respect and self love and wanting to feel really good, I actually think consistency in some form of discipline is a really beautiful and empowering action.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is all about perspective. All of life really is perspective shifts and reframing. Also, I had to sit with myself, why am I so triggered by the word discipline? It's because I didn't really like told what to do. I've always been a bit rebellious in that sense where someone told me to do something, I'm like, oh, I just want to do the opposite. And I had to like come back into a little bit more balance within myself to heal those kind of phrases in the wellness world and just in life, discipline and consistency and devotion, like they all go hand in hand. But to your point, it's what is your why? And if we are looking at discipline from this, crazy self optimization, must be perfect all the time, then we can get in a little bit of unbalance. So,
Also, I feel like self-care is really in right now, but everything that you're saying is like you said, a form of self-love, a form of self-care, and there's so much you can do that doesn't require you to buy anything at all. That for me, for a long time, self-care was I associated it kind of with, like, spending a lot of money or products, and now my self-care routine Annie and I have been joking about how, like, we could devote 5 hours to our self-care routines, honestly, because I love doing it now. It doesn't feel like a chore. It's like, I love journaling. I love going on a walk and, like, taking in sunlight and taking out my headphones and just, like, being in the moment. I love breathing. Like all these things feel really good when you start befriending your body as opposed to feeling like it's a chore or you have to do a certain thing or whatever. And finding, I think also, I'm sure you see this with your patients, like, or clients or anyone you're working with, the things that work for one person, you said this earlier in the podcast too, the things that work for one person are not going to work for everyone. And so there's also like a fun element of like trying things until you find what really sits right with you. And that exploration can be really cool to just like try out things until you feel something that you like are excited to do. Maybe not every day, but with frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the main pillars in my life, around, how I feel like I have really healed, or one piece of advice that I could give around healing is to simplify your life, to actually take away things instead of feeling like you have to add in so much. And, I like to look at what our ancestors were doing and look at more of ancestral ways of living. Obviously, it's not going to look the same. We live in a very different world than our ancestors did. But I do think when we can return to what our ancestors were doing from, a humanistic viewpoint, there was a lot that they were doing that was right. They were waking up at and getting sunlight, regulating their circadian rhythms, going on walks, putting their feet on the earth. And somehow this has become this like woo woo hippie kind of concept, which I think is just insane to me because it's really just like returning to what it means to be human. Um,
I wanted to
and
ask you about or
yeah,
sorry, I wanted to ask you about that too, because I do think a lot of the you've been to so much school and you have degrees in this stuff, and Annie and I are studying it too, and we know that everything that we're saying has there's ancestral wisdom there. There is science behind it. But for some reason it's perceived as very woo-woo or not legitimate. And I I'm kind of wondering like why that is, or if you run into that at all with your practice. Like why does this seem not maybe trustworthy or scientific to people?
I mean, honestly, I think because you can't sell these things, there's no money involved. So, I could go deep down the rabbit hole of big pharma and conventional medicine, but I do think there has been quite a narrative within kind of those things that has created a lot of separation around these types of practices, simply tuning into your breath and having a breathwork practice. Sometimes that's seen as, this is not what I believe, but some people see that as like demonic. And, these things are very controversial. But I just think because you can't really sell. There's no, yeah, really monetary value on these things that it's become something that hasn't been looked at as much or pushed into the narrative of society. And also, I don't really believe that um I'm trying to be careful with what I'm saying because I don't want to sound like too political here. It's really not political though. It really just goes into the health 101 in my opinion. But I just think that the typical narrative, there's a lot of disempowerment. And I don't know if the people that are really in charge and our leaders are really wanting individuals to feel empowered in their choices and empowered in their health.
I also think so much of it goes back to the things that heal us the most are inherently unmonetizable. And we live in a capitalist society that wants to make money. Like one of the most alarming statistics is that
Yeah.
that diabetes is one of the most profitable businesses in the US, and
Yeah.
IVF is getting up there too, and it's just like, oh my god, it's a story for another day, but there's a lot that we can do to heal ourselves without spending a lot of money, and to prevent chronic disease and prevent the need for, obviously time and place for all pharmaceuticals and IVF, and, thank God we have all the medical care that we do in this country, but a lot of it can be prevented with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not against conventional medicine. I believe there's a time and a place. Conventional medicine has saved my life at certain times in my life. Thank God for it. But I think, it's finding that balance of working with ancient ancestral practices and remembering how intelligent and just wise that our bodies are to be able to build a better relationship around self-trust within ourselves without having to reach for so much outside of us externally.
I'd love to leave it with that. That was a really high note. Madison, where can everybody find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. I'm Madison Liz Miller. There's a link to my website on there if you want to learn more just about my background or studies and things like that. But please send me a message. I would love to just connect and be your friend.
Thank you, Madison. It was so fun to have you on, and we will chat soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
If something in today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to pause and notice where it's sitting within you.
Living in alignment is not about fixing yourself or becoming someone new. It's about listening, trusting, and slowly coming home to who you already are.
Thank you for spending this time with us and for being part of this community.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might resonate with it too. See you next time.